Okay, let's keep on going. So when I left off, I was talking about our slideshow, and I was talking about our slideshow with regard to how do neurons work. And let's talk about that. So neurons, if you've had biopsychology, you'll know. If you haven't, let's do a refresher quickly. Neurons work through an electrochemical process. Electro meaning electric, chemical obviously meaning chemicals. Here you can see a couple of brain cells hooked up, communicating with each other. Here is neuron. Actually, they've got this backwards, the way that they labeled these. Why did they do this? I would label this neuron 2 actually neuron 1, and here's why. Because neuron 1 has myelinated axon. These have glial cells, which concentrate to make uh, myelin sheaths. So myelin sheaths, when these develop, these actually make your brain more efficient and work quicker. And so this neuron right here has a nucleus, and it decides to send a signal via its axon. Axon sends information. Dendrite receives information. Dendrite, think about branches. So a tree is receiving precipitation, like branches on a tree. An axon sends. So this neuron number 2 really doesn't really see its axon anywhere. Neuron 2 here, as it's labeled, is sending information to neuron 1 in all these little places. So axons send, dendrites receive. The synapse is a fancy word for a gap. So each place, like pretend this is an axon, this is a dendrite. This cell is sending information, this cell is receiving information. This axon and dendrite actually don't touch. There's actually a little gap, and that's called a synapse. There's some basic, those will be test questions about each one of those. Okay, what's this guy going to do? Why is he going to do this? Shock somebody, right? Why? So his heart's arrhythmic, or maybe it's stopped. Why shock? Because the heart runs on electricity. There's an electrical impulse coming down from your brain, sending into our nerve cells, sending a little signal to your heart to pump via electricity. So there's this, hopefully you have a sinus rhythm. Hopefully it's predictable. So your heart's running on electricity. It's why if I stuck a fork in an outlet, I'm gonna be messed up. If I get struck by lightning, I'm not gonna work the same because electricity is flowing through all of us right now, especially in our brains. We also have these chemicals that are floating around in us called neurotransmitters. So chemicals within the brain are called neurotransmitters. The process, this electrochemical process of communication, is called neurotransmission. So you're receiving a message to your eye right now, and it's translating that into an electrical signal that's running through your brain, crossing through your optic nerve, running in your optic nerve, crossing through the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the middle of your brain, going back to your occipital lobe, and it's processing information about me talking to you right now and about this image. And the way that's happening is, boom, each one of these neurons, each one of these brain cells, the nuclei within them are making decisions to send that electrical signal on, which is then causing the release of chemicals into this synapse. The chemicals are neurotransmitters. Here's the release of the neurotransmitter here. The neurotransmitter binds to the dendrite or the next cell, and that then perpetuates the process. So everybody, if you shut your eyes, what happens then, a little vacuum turns on and sucks those chemicals, those neurotransmitters back up into the original cell. That's called reuptake. It's not vacuum, but you do have reuptake. So the chemicals get recycled. They go back to the original cell. But if you were to shut your eyes, that turns all this off. The electrical signals are stopped. Pretty cool. It's like off and on. Binary logic is what computers run on. It's what our brain runs on. It's either you have cells firing or you don't. That's us. Binary logic. Now we have 100 billion brain cells in our brain, and I said between 5,000 and 50,000 connections. That's over 500 trillion connections in our brain. If we try to get a medicine to like, take care of depression, take care of ADHD, all these different things, it's so imprecise. There are 500 trillion places where your brain is communicating with itself, at least 500 trillion. We can't ever get a medicine that's going to be not have side effects because your brain has around 55 or so chemicals in it, and that's it. So if you give no matter the sophistication, you give your brain or your body a chemical to take in to modify your brain. Like maybe you don't have enough serotonin. You need serotonin for mood. So you give somebody a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It's got all these side effects. It does have side effects. Sex, appetite, mood, a lot of different things. So things are tied together. These are important concepts. I hope these videos play. These are really important concepts. Watch these Harvard videos. They're really good about brain development for kids. I know these still work because I just played them in a social psychology class last week. So I know these links are still good. I don't know what the problem is. Here's some true false questions. I'm not going to go through this with you because this is usually an in-class activity. So we just missed out on this. You're welcome to read through those and answer them for yourself. Here's my stuff about the brain growing like a tree. Early on, all this basic stuff in your brainstem is wired up pretty well. And then as we grow, as we get bigger, imagine this huge, massive tree and all these 500 trillion connections as adults that we have in our brain. That would be the biggest like area of growth is like when we make new connections, when we make new synapses, all these wrinkles in the cerebral cortex, these are like they're like 50,000 neurons on this. Like if you put like the pinpoint of a needle, there's like 50,000 neurons on the pinpoint of a needle. And so that's just that, like all these little folds in your brain. These are actually the more folds, the better, because the folds show that you have a really high concentration of neurons in those folds and connections. And so it's actually only, so this doesn't do it justice. The cerebral cortex is only about a quarter of an inch thick. So again, represent your brain with your two fists put together. The cerebral cortex is only about a quarter of an inch thick, and that's really what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom is our cerebral cortex and all. So it's not that much. There's not that much evolutionary step in a quarter inch of neurons. We're not that far removed from the animals, as evidenced by our behaviors, especially in groups. Please read over this. It talks about there being a growth spurt between the 7th prenatal month and 2 years when half of the child's eventual brain weight is gained. Really just an explosion of brain growth here. 25% of your adult weight at birth to 75% of brain weight at 2 years old. So it's just really, synaptogenesis is where you have this formation of new connections between neurons. Plasticity, that's a good one. It's just the capacity for change. Generally, the younger you are, specifically like with language and things, the more capacity you have for change, more plastic your brain. Let me hit pause for just a minute because I am trying to take care of something over here that's going wrong. Okay, let's keep going. All right. So this talks a little bit about sensory integration. And newborn infants don't recognize the difference between a stranger's face and mother's face unless mother's voice accompanies her face. Again, just some things that we observed early on that were later confirmed by like neuroscience. All right, physical growth. We have what's called cephalocaudal development. That means that growth that proceeds from the head to the tail, which means a lot of the growth occurs here first and then grows out. So again, think about the tree extending out. Proximal distal development. So growth that proceeds from the center of the body to the extremities. And there you can kind of see the skeletal age figure of a developing hand. So if you have a male at 6 years, they are not super articulate at writing. It's just really hard. And you can see the hand grows a lot here, and from 6 months to 6 years to 8 years. Um, People just blowing me up and things happening. Here's some motor development, like 2.8 months is standard median age for rolling over. Sitting up is about 6 months, crawling about 7 months, standing not quite a year, walks well about a year. Those are again middle of the bell curve. If you're within a couple standard deviations, don't freak out too much. Dynamic systems theory. What that means is that you have to have these certain milestones before other things can develop. It's kind of like talking about crawling. Somebody that crawls well at 7 months later on writes better, and so it's like there's some things that build on it on each other, and so like if you have a young child, like really research like what's appropriate. We have a really skewed vision of like kids development, holding onto a little screen and just sitting. That's not the way we've developed over millennia. Um, and trauma can have some really bad impacts too. So if you go through, like I'll mention the ACE study here, but if you go through really bad neglect or physical, like think about neural pruning and significant neural pruning, particularly with bonding. Like that can significantly stunt like the development of like personality and even coordination. Like I saw something today that said people with borderline personality disorder have greater difficulty in some physical tasks than others. And the borderline personality disorder would develop early on, like between like birth and 6 years, because somebody is pathologically caring for them emotionally. Um, Vocabulary development is amazing. It varies sharply by, of all things, socioeconomic class. So professional families tended to use like 2,000 words, different words an hour. And by age 3, their babies tend to have like 1,100 word vocabularies. Working class families tended to use around 1,200 words per hour. Their 3-year-olds tended to use about 750 words. People who are on public assistance or also known as welfare, their parents used about 616 words per hour, and 3-year-olds were around 535 words. I'd say this is not just dealing with economic class, but it's also dealing with the amount of time that people have to devote to their children. So, if you read to your child every night, if you do things, even if your vocabulary is not like a professional family, if you're doing things that are interacting with your child, like reading and having them read and engaging these type of activities in their brain, that's going to help them later on. Again, the basic for learning. Um, Interestingly, head circumferences were significantly larger from higher socioeconomic status families with college degrees versus lower socioeconomic status homes with no college degrees. It's, resources matter. Um, so family and socialization, we define a family as two or more people related by birth, marriage, adoption, or choice who have emotional ties and responsibility to each other. Socialization refers to the acquisition of beliefs, values, and behaviors considered desirable or acceptable to a culture. Families are dynamic, developing constantly and changing and influencing one another. Extended family arrangements can be very beneficial in economically distressed situations. Children in collectivistic cultures display better psychological adjustment if raised by extended family. There's a lot of things that we can do to enhance parenting socialization. I'm gonna stop there. I think this has gone on long enough. This is a long recording. It's longer than what I wanted. And so I'm going to stop there and just require this video. I'll try to start there next time we meet as a group. But gang, I'll release something on epigenetics. Please dig into this subject. This is fascinating and it has a lot to do with child development. So I hope you find this engaging and I look forward to seeing you next Monday.